Every American city has a sound all its own. This is the story of where it began, the soundtrack of us.
They call it a lot of things. The Big Easy, the Crescent City,
The city that care forgot, the birthplace of jazz, New Orleans. Do something for me. Don't watch, just listen. That low, steady thud under everything, that's a pulse, a heartbeat. Hold on to it. It's the whole story. Now, those 12 seconds, one man, one horn, no band, no drums, just that.
People who know call it the most important 12 seconds in American music.
So, keep that number, 12 seconds. By the end of this story, you'll know exactly whose they are, and why this idiot, of all the cities on Earth, is the only one that could have made the man who played them.
And here's the part that'll keep you up at night.
The freest music in America was born in the least free place in America. That pulse you're still hearing? Across almost all of the American South, they tried to kill it. They banned the drum. Slaveholders knew a drum could carry a message farther than a voice. So under slave codes, shaped by the old French Code Noir, the drum was silenced across the South.
Almost everywhere. There was one loophole.
New Orleans was Catholic, French, then Spanish, and Catholic law kept the Sabbath as a day of rest. On Sundays, the enslaved were allowed to gather, and they gathered in one place, Congo Square, where the drum never died. In 1819, an architect named Benjamin Latrobe, the man who rebuilt the United States Capitol after the British burned it, walked into that square, and he was stunned enough to draw what he saw: barrel drums, log drums, a banza, a Gordon string ancestor of the banjo. And in the singing over those drums, a note that bent and slid, refusing to sit still on any fixed pitch, the blue note.
So this is where jazz was born, right?
No, not the birthplace, the taproot, the deepest root the whole tree still drinks from. And a root needs more than water to grow. A taproot needs feeding, and no city on earth got fed like this one. 6 worlds poured into New Orleans, all at once.
French opera houses, real ones downtown, marching brass bands, ragtime off the piano, the blues coming up from the country, spirituals out of the church.
5 ingredients, but a gumbo needs a secret one, and it came across the water. In 1809, refugees from the Haitian Revolution, routed through Cuba, arrived in a single wave that nearly doubled the size of the city. And they brought a Caribbean rhythm with that rhythm had a name. And decades later, the man who called himself the inventor of jazz gave it one.
If you can't manage to put tinges of Spanish in your tunes, you will never be able to get the right seasoning for jazz.
The Spanish tinge. That's the habanera. The Caribbean heartbeat sitting right down inside the American one.
6 worlds in one pot. But a pot this crowded doesn't just simmer. Downtown and uptown, 2 of those worlds were about to be forced to collide. By the 1890s, New Orleans was really 2 cities, split by Canal Street. Downtown, the Creoles of color, French-speaking, Catholic, conservatory-trained, they rid music, cleanly, off the page.
Uptown, the black players from the American side. They didn't read it, they felt it. Blues, bent notes, improvisation, all ear.
2 traditions, a street apart, with almost nothing to say to each other. And then, the law slammed them together, 1892. A Creole shoemaker named Homer Plessy boarded a whites-only rail car on purpose to challenge segregation. 1896. Plessy versus Ferguson. The Supreme Court blessed separate but equal. And the color line hardened around everyone with African ancestry, including the trained Creoles downtown.
So overnight, the conservatory Creoles get shoved out of their world and onto the uptown bandstands, right next to the blues players.
The readers meet the feelers, discipline meets the blues, theory meets the bent note. And in that forced collision, that collision is jazz. But every music needs a first voice to speak it out loud, and his name is almost lost. The first voice of that collision was a cornet player named Buddy Bolden. They called him King. He pointed his horn straight at the blues and played it louder and rawer than anyone had dared. He was, by every account, the first.
They said you could hear King Bolden's cornet for miles, across the whole city on a still night.
That's legend. Beautiful and unprovable. What's real is this. A boy named Louis Armstrong, still a child, would press his ear to the wall of a hall on Perdido Street, the funky butt, just to catch the sound. And then the sound stopped. In 1906 and 1907, Bolden came apart. He was committed to a state asylum, where he stayed for 24 years until he died. He never made a single recording, not one. The man they call the fountainhead of jazz left nothing to hear. The fountainhead is a silence, so the question becomes, if the first voice was never captured, then where did this sound actually live? And the answer is, everywhere the city breathed. Everywhere the city breathed. So let's follow the breath, starting with the neighborhood everyone gets wrong. In 1897, the city fenced off a district of legal vice and called it Storyville. And ever since, people have said it. Jazz was born in the brothels.
Yeah. No, mostly there was one piano professor tickling keys in a parlor. A brothel is a small room. It cannot hold a brass band.
The real engine wasn't the red light district. It was the neighborhoods and their social aid and pleasure clubs. These were mutual aid societies. For a few cents a week, working black families bought what the state refused them. A doctor when you were sick, a decent burial when you died. Call it the community's health insurance.
And when a member died, the club didn't mourn quietly. They hired a band.
The jazz funeral, dirge to the grave, then, cutting loose on the way back, the second line dancing behind the band. Grief walking out into joy. Those same clubs and their members helped fund Homer Plessy's stand in court. The music and the fight for rights were paid for out of the same collection plate. This is where the young talent got its reps. Men like Kid Ory leading bands, and a teenaged Louis Armstrong blowing cornet on the riverboats steaming up and down the Mississippi. A living, breathing, citywide sound. And a sound this big had to reach a microphone eventually. So, who got there first? Who got there first? In 1917, jazz reached a record for the very first time. And the band in the studio was 5 white New Orleans men. The original Dixieland Jazz Band.
The song was Livery Stable Blues, a novelty. The horns literally imitate barnyard animals. A whinny, a moo, a crow. That's the first jazz record.
And it sold about 250,000 copies. It made jazz a national craze overnight. Now picture the studio. Inside the glass, 5 white musicians playing a music they learned uptown. Outside the door, the black and Creole players who created it, who couldn't get into the room. Remember the door. It's going to matter for the rest of this series. It took 5 more years. In 1922, Kid Ory's band became the first black New Orleans band to record jazz. And to do it, they had to leave home and go all the way to Los Angeles.
And to be clear, Or-Ease was the first black New Orleans band on record. Not the first African-American record ever. Different claim.
As for the ODJB's leader, Nick LaRocca, he spent his later years insisting on this.
Jazz is strictly a white man's music.
It's a lie. And one uptown kid, the boy who'd pressed his ear to Bolden's wall, is about to answer him the loudest way there is, by leaving. The answer to LaRocca wasn't an argument, it was a train ticket. It rode the Great Migration. Hundreds of thousands of black Americans leaving the South, many straight up the Illinois Central Line to Chicago and on to New York. In 1922, Louis Armstrong followed his mentor King Oliver North to Chicago. And there, Louis did the thing that changed everything.
He stepped out of the group. He took the solo. One voice, improvising, soaring over the band. He turned jazz into an art of the individual.
And those 12 seconds, the ones I told you to hold on to, all the way back at the start?
Wait, that was him?
1928, Chicago. Louis Armstrong steps to a microphone and opens a song called West End Blues with one unaccompanied run on his horn. 12 seconds, no band, just him. And every musician who heard it understood the rules had just changed. Forever. That's the sound you heard at the very beginning. The barefoot kid with his ear pressed to Buddy Bolden's wall grew up and played the 12 seconds this whole city had been building toward for 100 years.
The Pulse became a person.
That's where this story was always going. And here's the myth we have to bury. People say everyone fled New Orleans when Storyville closed in 1917, that the club shut and the music escaped.
That story was basically invented, dramatized in a 1939 book and a 1947 movie. It's tidy. It's false.
They didn't flee a closed brothel district. They left for what every migrant leaves for. Jobs, real wages, safety, and dignity the South would not give them. And what they carried out of this one city became the family tree of American sound. Swing, bebop, rhythm and blues, rock and roll, funk, and hip-hop. All of it drinks from the taproot in Congo Square. And the city itself, it never went quiet. The sound is still here, in the second line down the street in Preservation Hall, in a festival that started in 1970 with maybe 350 people and became Jazz Fest. It came from here, and it stayed, both true. New Orleans gave American music its pulse, but listen closely now.
The Pulse is leaving town.
It's riding the river north, and where it's headed, that steady heartbeat is about to get a hard new edge, a backbeat. There's a little studio called Sun, a label that'll be called Stax, and a truck driver from Tupelo named Elvis, who's been listening to all of this a lot more closely than anyone knows. Next time on the soundtrack of us, Memphis.